John sat at the small wooden kitchen table, the evening sunlight spilling through the half-open blinds, painting long golden stripes across the room. His hands were rough and weathered from years of service in the military, yet tonight, they shook slightly as he counted the coins in his worn leather wallet. There was exactly $3.75. He sighed, a mix of frustration and determination pressing against his chest. It wasn't the money that bothered him, exactly, but the fact that he had promised to meet someone for a blind date tonight. A blind date. Just the thought made his stomach twist nervously, and yet he could feel a quiet excitement bubbling underneath. He wasn't used to this part of life, dating after divorce, after losing so much to duty and circumstance. It was foreign, unfamiliar, and he feared he might fail at it entirely. Across the table, Emma, his 7-year-old daughter with bright brown eyes that always seemed to see more than she should, was coloring in her sketchbook, completely unaware of her father's anxious thoughts. She hummed a soft tune, the one her mother used to sing before she passed away 5 years ago, and John felt a pang of sorrow mixed with love. He always tried to be strong for her, to hide the struggles behind a calm face, but tonight, the weight of the world felt heavier than usual. John carefully pushed a few coins together, counting them again, imagining the small cafe he planned to go to. He knew he couldn't afford anything extravagant, no fancy dinner, no lavish gifts, but he also knew that money didn't define the value of a meeting, the magic of a conversation, or the possibility of a connection. He had learned in the military that courage mattered more than resources, and tonight, he would try to summon all the courage he had left. Across town, Taylor was getting ready in her apartment, her reflection in the mirror showing a confident, tattooed woman in her late 20s. She was known among her friends as fearless, bold, and unapologetically herself, a biker with a reputation that sometimes made people hesitate before approaching her. Her arms were decorated with colorful ink, each tattoo telling a story she rarely shared, and tonight, she felt a flutter of nervousness she wasn't used to feeling. Normally, she thrived on independence, on freedom, on the rush of riding her motorcycle down endless roads with the wind in her hair. But tonight, something different tugged at her heart. She had agreed to meet someone she didn't know, and even though she told herself it was just curiosity, deep down she felt a strange anticipation. She wondered if he would be different from the men she usually met, different from the ones who judged her based on looks, on style, on the toughness she wore like armor. She had seen enough people close doors too quickly, but tonight, she wanted to try again, to see if someone could see beyond the surface, beyond the leather jackets and tattoos, beyond the rough edges of life that she and so many others carried. John glanced at the clock, the numbers glowing softly in the dim kitchen, reminding him that it was almost time to leave. He stood slowly, stretching his tired muscles, and felt the familiar ache that came from years of physical service and mental strain. He moved to the small cabinet and pulled out the jacket he had worn countless times, one that had traveled with him through difficult months, through sleepless nights and long, lonely days. He draped it over his arm, glanced once more at Emma, and smiled, hoping his nervous energy didn't show too much. She looked up at him with innocent curiosity and asked if he would be safe, and John knelt down, brushing her hair gently, and said, "I'll be just fine, kiddo. I'm just going out to meet someone, that's all." She nodded, returning to her drawing, and John felt a mix of relief and longing. He remembered his past, the friendships formed in harsh conditions, the laughter shared in fleeting moments, and the small joys that made life worth living even in the darkest times. He hoped tonight could be one of those joys, not just for himself, but for the example he wanted to set for Emma, that courage, hope, and openness mattered more than money, than appearance, than fear of rejection. Meanwhile, Taylor finished adjusting her leather jacket, tugging slightly at the sleeves to make sure it sat just right. She looked at her reflection one last time, running a hand over the intricate tattoo on her forearm, and thought about the stories she had kept to herself. Each mark on her skin was a memory, a lesson, a victory, a heartbreak, but tonight, she wanted to leave all those judgments aside. She wanted to meet someone who could see her as more than a biker, more than a collection of experiences and ink. She wanted someone who might laugh at her jokes, who might listen to her stories, who might make her feel a spark of connection she hadn't felt in years. She walked to the door, taking a deep breath, feeling the evening air brush against her face, a mixture of excitement and nerves tightening in her chest. Meanwhile, John stepped outside, the cool evening breeze brushing against his face, making him shiver slightly as he tightened his jacket around him. The streets were quiet, almost serene, and the fading sunlight cast long shadows that danced across the pavement. He walked slowly toward the bus stop, his mind running through possible conversation topics, imagining scenarios where the date might go horribly wrong or surprisingly right. He thought about the small cafe, about the modest table he had reserved in his mind, about the humble cup of coffee that would be his only expenditure. And yet, despite all the fears, he felt a tiny, stubborn flame of hope flickering inside him. Somewhere across town, Taylor was already heading toward the cafe, her motorcycle parked at a nearby lot, the engine's hum fading as she walked. Her steps were confident, her posture straight, but inside, her heart raced in a way that made her cheeks warm. She wondered what he would be like, what kind of man John would be, whether he would be kind, funny, awkward, serious, or all of it at once. She reminded herself that the most important part was honesty in their words, in their intentions, in the little gestures that showed who they really were. And as John walked, counting the coins in his pocket one last time, and Taylor approached from her side of the city, a strange sense of anticipation hung in the air, invisible yet palpable, as if the universe itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what would unfold when two very different lives collided in a small cafe that evening. John arrived at the small cafe a few minutes before the time they had agreed to meet. The sign above the door was simple, painted in faded letters, but there was a charm to the place that made him feel calm despite his nerves. He took a deep breath, adjusted his worn jacket, and stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries filled the air, warm and inviting, and he could hear quiet chatter from the other patrons. He scanned the cafe quickly, hoping to spot the woman he was supposed to meet. That was when he saw her. Taylor sitting near the window, the sunlight catching the edges of her hair, casting a glow that made her stand out from the rest of the room. She looked up as if she had sensed him, and for a moment, their eyes met. John froze, caught off guard by the intensity in her gaze. She was not what he expected, and yet there was something familiar in her expression, something that made him feel as if he had known her for longer than a moment. He walked toward her slowly, trying to appear confident even though his heart was racing, his stomach twisting with nerves. Taylor watched him approach, feeling a mix of curiosity and caution. She had met many people in her life, but there was a sincerity in his eyes that she rarely saw. He looked ordinary at first glance, simple clothes, a quiet demeanor, but there was strength in his posture, a calmness that spoke of experience and resilience. He smiled nervously as he reached the table, and she returned the smile, a little hesitant, a little intrigued. John pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, placing his wallet on the table for just a brief moment, though he quickly tucked it away again, embarrassed by the modest amount of money he had. Taylor noticed, but she didn't judge. Instead, she felt a strange warmth in realizing that he did not try to appear richer or more impressive than he was. They exchanged greetings, awkward at first, both searching for the right words. The waiter arrived to take their order, and John quickly counted his coins again. He could afford 2 small coffees and a shared pastry, and he pointed to the menu with a small smile, hoping it would be enough. Taylor raised an eyebrow, then laughed softly. "That's fine," she said, her voice warm, "we don't need anything fancy." Her laughter put him more at ease, and for the first time that evening, he felt a real connection, a sense that money and appearances didn't matter in this moment. They ordered, and as the waiter left, an initial silence fell between them. John scratched the back of his neck, unsure how to begin. Taylor noticed the gesture and smiled, a little amused. "So," she said, "tell me about yourself, John. What's a man like you doing on a blind date?" He chuckled nervously, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly," he said, "I guess I'm just trying to find someone who understands life a little, someone who sees things as they really are, not just the surface." Taylor nodded, intrigued. She had spent so long meeting people who only looked at the surface, who judged tattoos or clothes or the size of a paycheck. Here was someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding her, in seeing her as she truly was. John continued, talking about his life as a veteran, the years of service that had shaped him, the challenges of being a single father, and the little joys that came from raising his daughter. He spoke softly but with honesty, not exaggerating, not trying to impress, just sharing. Taylor listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. She felt a deep respect growing for him, admiration for the way he carried his responsibilities, for the quiet strength in his words, and for the love he showed his daughter without needing to boast about it. When it was her turn to speak, she hesitated at first. She wasn't used to opening up to strangers, but something in John's presence encouraged her. She spoke about her life as a biker, the freedom she felt on the open road, the artwork she wore on her skin, and the challenges of being judged for being herself. She told him about the joy she found in small things, like sunsets over the hills, the smell of rain, or the laughter of friends around a campfire. John listened without interrupting, nodding, asking gentle questions that showed he cared. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from serious topics to lighter ones. They laughed about small mishaps, shared stories of awkward moments, and found common ground in the appreciation of simple pleasures. John told a funny story about Emma insisting on wearing mismatched socks to school, and Taylor laughed, picturing the little girl's determined expression. She shared a memory of painting her first tattoo on a friend's arm and how nervous she had been, and John chuckled, imagining the careful hands and focused eyes. The more they talked, the more they realized that despite their differences, his quiet, disciplined life and her adventurous, free-spirited world, they shared similar values: honesty, kindness, courage, and a desire for genuine connection. The coffee arrived, steaming and fragrant, and John poured a small amount into each cup, careful to make it feel like a shared experience. Taylor smiled at the small gesture, noticing how attentive he was even in these little things. He reached for the pastry, breaking it into halves so they could share, and they ate slowly, savoring not just the food but the conversation, the moment, the unexpected comfort of finding someone who seemed to understand. Outside, the evening sky turned shades of orange and pink, visible through the window beside them, casting a gentle glow over the cafe and adding a quiet magic to the scene. John glanced at the clock, realizing they had been talking for nearly an hour without noticing, and Taylor's eyes followed his. Neither wanted the moment to end, though both knew the evening would soon close. As the conversation continued, John felt a sense of relief and happiness he hadn't felt in years. He realized that the money in his pocket didn't matter. The small coffee and pastry, humble as it was, had turned into a beautiful experience simply because of honesty, openness, and the willingness to listen. Taylor, too, felt a change within herself. She had expected nothing more than a casual, perhaps awkward encounter, but she found herself drawn to John's sincerity, his quiet strength, and the way he looked at life with a mixture of hope and resilience. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe to be herself, not needing to impress or hide behind her tattoos or her independence. They talked about dreams and fears, about childhood memories, about lessons learned from mistakes and the little joys that made life worthwhile. Each story, each shared laugh, each moment of understanding built a bridge between them, a connection that felt both unexpected and inevitable. As the cafe began to quiet down and the last few customers left, they realized how quickly time had passed. The soft clinking of cups and the low hum of conversation were fading, replaced by the calm evening outside. John and Taylor sat for a moment in comfortable silence, enjoying the simple presence of each other. Neither spoke, yet the silence was not awkward, it was full of unspoken understanding, a mutual recognition of the rare connection they had found. Finally, John spoke, his voice gentle but steady. "I'm really glad I came tonight," he said. Taylor looked at him, a soft smile forming on her lips. "Me too," she replied. It was a simple sentence, but it carried the weight of everything they had shared, a promise that perhaps this evening was only the beginning. They lingered a few more moments, both reluctant to leave the warmth of the cafe and the comfort of conversation that had flowed so easily. Outside, the night was cool, stars beginning to twinkle in the clear sky, and the world seemed peaceful, almost as if it, too, recognized the significance of their meeting. As they prepared to leave, John felt a quiet excitement, a sense that something meaningful had begun. Taylor, walking beside him toward the door, felt a lightness in her heart she hadn't experienced in years. They stepped out into the night together, two people from different worlds, connected by honesty, courage, and the simple act of sharing time, stories, and laughter. In that moment, under the soft glow of the streetlights, both realized that life could surprise you in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes, the smallest gestures, the simplest cup of coffee, the willingness to listen, the courage to show your true self could create the most unforgettable memories. And so, with hearts a little lighter, spirits a little brighter, and smiles that held promise, John and Taylor began the next chapter of their story, unsure of what lay ahead but certain that this evening had changed them both forever. After leaving the cafe, John and Taylor walked slowly down the quiet street, the soft glow of the streetlights illuminating their path. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from a nearby park, and the gentle hum of distant traffic provided a calm backdrop to their conversation. Neither of them felt rushed, both seemed content to take their time, enjoying the unexpected comfort of one another's presence. Taylor glanced at John as he spoke about his daughter, Emma, describing her curious mind, her endless questions, and the small ways she made him laugh each day. Her eyes softened, imagining a little girl with bright brown eyes running around a warm, loving home, and she realized how much responsibility and love John carried in his life. John noticed the change in her expression and felt a sense of reassurance, as if he were being quietly accepted for who he truly was. He spoke about his days in the military, the discipline, the challenges, and the moments of quiet reflection that had shaped him into the person he had become. Taylor listened intently, her fingers brushing lightly against the sleeve of her jacket as she thought about the courage it must take to live life with such honesty and resilience. She shared stories of her own life on the road, the freedom of riding her motorcycle through winding paths, the small towns she had visited, the people she had met, and the lessons learned from those experiences. John's attention never wavered. He asked questions with genuine curiosity, wanting to understand her world, not just superficially, but with the depth that came from real interest and respect. Taylor laughed at a story John told about a camping trip with Emma, where he had gotten lost trying to set up a tent and ended up covered in mud, and John chuckled at a tale she shared about learning to repair her motorcycle chain for the first time, feeling both proud and frustrated in equal measure. The laughter flowed naturally, like the easy rhythm of old friends reconnecting after years apart, and neither of them noticed how much time was passing. They found a nearby bench in a small park, the soft grass underfoot and the distant sound of children playing in another part of the park adding a gentle liveliness to the evening. Sitting down, they continued talking about their dreams, fears, and the little things in life that brought them joy. John spoke about wanting to provide Emma with a life full of love and laughter, the importance of teaching her kindness, and the hope that she would grow up confident and compassionate. Taylor, in turn, spoke about her desire for freedom, adventure, and a life where she could be herself without judgment, and how she sometimes worried that people would not see past her exterior. John reached out instinctively, placing a hand near hers on the bench, not touching but close enough to convey warmth and reassurance. Taylor noticed, feeling a quiet surge of trust and safety that she had not felt in a long time. They fell into a comfortable silence, simply watching the sky turn a deeper shade of navy as stars began to appear, tiny points of light twinkling like little promises above them. John thought about the small amount of money he had brought with him, realizing it did not matter. What mattered was the connection they were building, the shared laughter, the stories, and the honesty in each word spoken. Taylor felt the same, noticing that the warmth in her chest had little to do with the comfort of the evening air and everything to do with the man sitting beside her, a man whose quiet strength and gentle heart had already begun to leave a lasting impression on her. As they continued to talk, John suggested they take a short walk, and they meandered along the edge of the park, passing benches, lamp posts, and small flower beds that glowed faintly under the night sky. They talked about books they had read, movies that had made them laugh or cry, and the kind of music that lifted their spirits. John mentioned how Emma loved stories about adventures and magic, and Taylor smiled, picturing the little girl's excited face as she listened to her father reading aloud. Taylor shared that she often drew inspiration for her tattoos from books and songs that moved her, and John found himself fascinated by the idea that art could capture emotions so vividly. Each exchange brought them closer, their conversation a gentle dance of understanding, empathy, and genuine curiosity. At one point, a cool breeze swept through the park, and John instinctively offered his jacket, though he was already wearing it. Taylor hesitated, then accepted, draping it over her shoulders and feeling a warmth that went beyond the physical. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes about John's character: thoughtful, considerate, and kind. She looked at him, noticing the quiet pride he took in small acts of care, and she realized that this evening was teaching her something she hadn't expected, that true connection was rare, and when it happened, it could feel effortless, natural, and comforting all at once. They walked further, past a small fountain that glimmered under the streetlights, the sound of water adding a gentle rhythm to the night. John stopped for a moment, watching the water ripple and shimmer, and Taylor noticed a contemplative look on his face. She asked him what he was thinking, and he replied honestly, speaking about how rare it was to meet someone who could listen so openly and respond with genuine understanding. Taylor smiled, feeling a similar sentiment in her heart. They continued their walk, talking about hopes for the future, small ambitions, and the kind of life they wanted to build, not just for themselves, but for the people they loved. John mentioned wanting Emma to see that life could be full of goodness, courage, and love, and Taylor spoke of wanting to inspire others to embrace who they truly were. The conversation deepened as they shared personal reflections, laughter mingling with quiet pauses, each comfortable with the other's presence in a way that surprised them both. As the night grew darker, they found themselves near a quiet street lined with trees, the shadows creating a sense of intimacy and calm. John suggested they sit on another bench, and they did, their conversation flowing easily as if they had known each other for much longer than a few hours. Taylor felt a sense of peace she rarely experienced, a feeling that she could be herself without fear of judgment. John felt gratitude and joy, realizing that sometimes, the most meaningful moments in life came from the simplest experiences, walking under streetlights, sharing stories, and listening with a full heart. They spoke of memories that made them smile, lessons learned from mistakes, and the small victories that often went unnoticed by others. John told Taylor about a time Emma had surprised him by helping him with chores she was too young to handle, and Taylor laughed, sharing a story about helping a friend fix a flat tire on a lonely road late at night. Each story revealed layers of character, strength, and kindness, and both realized they were learning more about each other than they could have imagined in such a short time. Finally, as they prepared to head back, neither wanted the evening to end. The park was quiet, the night calm, and the city lights flickered in the distance, casting a soft glow over the streets. John offered to walk Taylor to her motorcycle, and she agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and comfort. As they walked side by side, there was an unspoken understanding between them, that this evening had changed something fundamental. It had shown them that connection, honesty, and shared moments mattered more than wealth, appearances, or past experiences. As Taylor reached her motorcycle and mounted it, John stood beside her, watching with a quiet admiration. She smiled at him, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and he returned it, feeling a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. They exchanged words of gratitude for the evening, promising to meet again soon, and as Taylor rode off into the night, John watched her go, a warmth lingering in his chest and a spark of excitement for what the future might hold. Walking back through the quiet streets toward his small apartment, John thought about the unexpected magic of the evening. Despite having only a few coins in his pocket, he had shared laughter, stories, and a connection that felt richer than anything money could buy. Taylor, feeling the wind in her hair and the freedom of the open road, thought about the man she had met, his kindness, his honesty, and the way he had listened so attentively. Both knew that this was just the beginning, that life had a way of surprising people when they least expected it, and that sometimes, the simplest moments became the most meaningful memories. And so, as the night deepened, John and Taylor carried with them a quiet sense of hope, a recognition of the rare bond that had begun to form, and the understanding that even in ordinary places, ordinary nights, extraordinary connections could happen when hearts were open and willing to listen, trust, and embrace the beauty of shared human experience. The next morning, John woke early to the sound of sunlight streaming through his small apartment window, casting a warm glow across the modest living room. Emma was still asleep, curled up under her blanket, her favorite stuffed animal clutched tightly in her small arms. John quietly moved to the kitchen, making himself a cup of coffee and reflecting on the previous evening. The memory of walking with Taylor through the park, sharing stories, laughter, and genuine connection, lingered in his mind, bringing a rare sense of calm and happiness. He had expected nothing more than a simple blind date, something casual and perhaps forgettable, but what had unfolded was far beyond anything he could have imagined. There was a depth to their conversation, a sincerity in her eyes, and a warmth in her laughter that stayed with him long after they had parted. He thought about the way she had listened to him talk about Emma, about his experiences in the military, and about his small dreams for the future, and he felt a mix of pride and humility. It was rare to meet someone who could make you feel seen without judgment, and Taylor had done that effortlessly. Meanwhile, across town, Taylor was also waking up with thoughts of John lingering in her mind. She sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea, her tattoos catching the morning light as she absently traced one of the designs on her forearm. She thought about his quiet confidence, his honesty, and the way he had carried himself with dignity despite the modesty of his means. She remembered the small details, the careful way he had counted his coins, the gentle way he had offered her warmth, and the humor that had punctuated his stories. A smile formed on her face as she realized that she had felt a connection she rarely experienced, one that went beyond superficial attraction or fleeting interest. She had felt understood, valued, and comfortable being herself, and that was something she did not take lightly. John spent the morning preparing breakfast for Emma, making pancakes shaped like stars, her favorite, and humming softly as she stirred awake, blinking sleep from her eyes. She ran to him, excited and cheerful, and he lifted her onto his lap, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Good morning, kiddo," he said, and Emma grinned, immediately telling him about a dream she had the night before. As they ate breakfast together, John shared small details about his plans for the day, careful to create a sense of routine and stability for Emma. Yet even amidst the ordinary tasks of life, preparing food, tidying the apartment, and helping Emma get ready for school, his mind kept drifting to Taylor, to the way the previous evening had unfolded with ease and joy. Taylor, after finishing her morning routine, decided to go for a short ride on her motorcycle, the wind brushing against her face as she navigated familiar streets. She felt a sense of freedom, but her thoughts kept returning to John, to the kindness in his eyes, the way he had made her feel safe and comfortable, and the gentle humor that had punctuated their evening. She smiled to herself, thinking about how unexpected it was to meet someone who made such an impression in such a short time. The thought brought a warmth to her chest and a sense of hope she had not felt in a long time. Later that afternoon, John and Emma went to the small local park for a walk. Emma ran ahead, laughing, chasing after squirrels, and John followed at a slower pace, watching her with pride and love. As he walked, he reflected on the importance of moments like these, the simplicity of spending time with someone you love, the joy in small, shared experiences, and the way life could surprise you when you least expected it. He realized that the evening with Taylor had reminded him of the beauty of human connection, of the joy in being fully present with someone, and of the courage it took to open your heart to new experiences. Taylor, meanwhile, returned from her ride and decided to take a quiet walk through her neighborhood, enjoying the familiar sights and sounds of her town. She passed by a small cafe she often visited, a bookstore she loved, and a park where she had spent many evenings thinking and reflecting. Yet no matter where she walked, her thoughts kept returning to John, the way he had listened to her, the way he had shared his life with honesty, and the way he had made her feel seen and valued. She felt a growing curiosity, a desire to know him better, and a quiet hope that this connection could continue to grow. As evening approached, John returned home with Emma, both of them tired but content. Emma did her homework at the small kitchen table while John prepared a simple dinner, and they talked about their day, sharing small stories and laughter. The ordinary routine of life felt comforting, yet John's thoughts kept drifting to Taylor, wondering if she was thinking of him, wondering if he would have the courage to reach out and see her again. Taylor, too, spent the evening reflecting on her life and her desires. She thought about her independence, her freedom, and the adventures she had experienced, Yet she also realized that something was different with John. He was someone who could bring warmth and stability into her life without taking away her freedom, someone who could listen and understand without judgment, and someone whose presence made her feel calm and happy in a way she rarely experienced. The more she thought about him, the more she felt a desire to see him again, to continue the conversation they had begun, and to explore the connection that had sparked so unexpectedly. That night, John tucked Emma into bed, reading her a story about a small, brave adventurer who faced challenges with courage and kindness. He kissed her forehead, whispered good night, and closed her bedroom door gently, pausing for a moment to think about his own life and the possibilities that lay ahead. He realized that despite the struggles he faced, despite the modesty of his means, and despite the challenges of being a single parent, life had a way of bringing unexpected joy, hope, and connection when you were open to it. Taylor, preparing for bed, sat by her window and watched the stars, thinking about the evening she had spent with John, the stories they had shared, and the laughter that had flowed so naturally between them. She felt a sense of gratitude for the experience, recognizing that it was rare to meet someone who could make such an impression in a short time. Her thoughts were filled with hope, curiosity, and a quiet excitement for what might come next. The following morning, John decided to send a small text to Taylor, a simple message expressing that he had enjoyed their time together and hoped to see her again soon. He felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as he typed the message, hoping it would be received warmly. Across town, Taylor's phone buzzed, and when she saw John's message, a smile spread across her face. She replied with enthusiasm, expressing her own enjoyment of the previous evening and her interest in meeting again. The exchange was simple, yet it carried a profound sense of connection and understanding, reinforcing the bond that had begun to form between them. Over the next few days, they continued to exchange messages, sharing small thoughts, observations, and glimpses into their daily lives. Each message strengthened their connection, building a sense of trust, warmth, and excitement for the next meeting. John shared little stories about Emma's adventures, the funny things she said, and the small joys of their life together. Taylor shared moments from her rides, her artwork, and the small victories and lessons from her days. Through these exchanges, they learned more about each other, discovered shared values, and deepened the sense of mutual respect and admiration that had begun on the first evening. One afternoon, John suggested they meet again at the same small cafe, choosing a table by the window where they had first connected. Taylor agreed, eager to continue their conversations and share more stories, thoughts, and laughter. When they met again, there was a sense of familiarity and comfort, a recognition that the initial spark had grown into something meaningful. They spoke with ease, laughed freely, and shared reflections that revealed even more about their personalities, dreams, and experiences. Each moment together reinforced the connection they had started to build, creating a foundation of trust, understanding, and warmth. As the evening ended, John walked Taylor to her motorcycle once more, feeling a sense of contentment and hope. They exchanged smiles, shared a few words of gratitude, and parted with the understanding that their bond was growing stronger, that their connection was becoming something rare and special, and that the possibilities for the future were bright with promise. Walking back home, John felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that life had a way of surprising you with joy, connection, and unexpected happiness when you approached it with honesty, courage, and an open heart. Taylor rode through the quiet streets, feeling a similar warmth, a growing hope, and the excitement of new beginnings, knowing that this connection with John had the potential to become something lasting and meaningful. And so, both carried with them the gentle awareness that life's simplest moments, shared laughter, honest conversation, and genuine presence could create the most extraordinary memories and open doors to new chapters filled with hope, trust, and heartfelt connection. A week had passed since their first evening together, yet John could not stop thinking about Taylor. The memory of her smile, her laughter, and the quiet way she had listened to him filled his mind as he prepared breakfast for Emma. He made her favorite pancakes again, cutting them into small heart shapes this time, and Emma giggled, excited by the simple gesture. "Daddy, you're the best chef in the world," she exclaimed, and John chuckled, feeling warmth spread through his chest. After breakfast, he decided to take a short walk with Emma to the nearby park, wanting to enjoy the morning together. As they walked, John spoke gently about the importance of kindness, honesty, and being brave enough to open your heart to new experiences. Emma listened attentively, her little hands swinging in his, her eyes bright with curiosity. At the same time, Taylor was preparing for her day, sitting by her window and sipping her coffee while looking at the city skyline. She thought about John and the past week, the messages they had exchanged, and the way their connection had grown in just a few days. A smile appeared on her face as she considered how rare it was to find someone who truly understood her, someone who could see beyond the surface and appreciate the real person inside. The anticipation of seeing John again brought a lightness to her steps, a feeling of excitement she had not experienced in a long time. Later that afternoon, they agreed to meet at the same cafe where it all began. John arrived first, sitting at their familiar table by the window, his hands folded nervously as he glanced out at the street. He felt a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, wondering how the day would unfold. Taylor walked in a few minutes later, her eyes searching the room until they found him. When their eyes met, both felt the familiar spark, the quiet reassurance that this connection was real and growing stronger. Taylor smiled warmly, and John rose slightly, greeting her with a nod and a soft, "Hi, Taylor." She responded with a playful wave and sat down across from him, the sunlight catching the edges of her hair and casting a soft glow over her face. The conversation began naturally, flowing effortlessly as they shared stories from the past week, small victories, challenges, and moments of laughter. John spoke about Emma's school project, the funny questions she asked, and the little things that made parenting a constant adventure. Taylor shared her experiences riding through the countryside, sketching new tattoo ideas, and enjoying the simple pleasures of her life. Each word, each smile, each shared glance strengthened the sense of connection between them. As they talked, John realized that what had started as a simple blind date had grown into something much deeper, a bond built on honesty, respect, and mutual admiration. He found himself opening up more than he had with anyone in years, sharing thoughts and feelings he often kept to himself. Taylor, too, felt a similar trust, a desire to let him see the real her, without fear or hesitation. They laughed together, their voices mingling with the soft background music of the cafe, and they paused often to listen, to absorb the comfort of being understood by another human being. The hours passed quickly, unnoticed, until the cafe announced that it was closing. Neither wanted to leave, but both understood that life would continue beyond these walls. John suggested they take a short walk to a nearby park, and Taylor agreed, feeling the excitement of continuing their time together. As they strolled, the city around them glowed under the evening lights, the streets quiet and peaceful. John spoke softly about his hopes for the future, about wanting to provide Emma with a life full of love and security, and about the kind of partnership he dreamed of sharing with someone who truly cared. Taylor listened, her heart warming, and she spoke about her own dreams, freedom, adventure, creativity, and building a life with someone who valued honesty and connection above all else. They shared stories of childhood memories, lessons learned from mistakes, and moments that had shaped them into who they were. The conversation was deep and meaningful, yet filled with laughter and lightheartedness, a balance that made both feel comfortable and joyful. At one point, John noticed Taylor shivering slightly from the cool evening air. Without hesitation, he offered her his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. She looked at him, surprised by the small gesture, and smiled, feeling a sense of warmth and care that went beyond the physical. "Thank you, John," she said softly, and he simply nodded, understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness spoke louder than words. As they continued walking, they came across a quiet fountain, the water glimmering under the streetlights, creating a serene and magical atmosphere. They stopped for a moment, both silent, watching the gentle ripples in the water, feeling the peacefulness of the night and the comfort of each other's presence. Taylor rested her hand lightly on the bench beside her, and John sat down, feeling a calm contentment he had not experienced in years. They spoke quietly about life, love, and the beauty of unexpected connections, realizing how rare it was to meet someone who could make you feel both understood and valued in such a short time. The night continued, and they wandered further into the park, sharing stories of small adventures, favorite books, and songs that had touched their hearts. Each revelation, each laugh, each moment of reflection brought them closer together, weaving a bond that felt both new and timeless. John thought about how grateful he was for the courage to attend the blind date, despite the modest means and simple plans. Taylor reflected on how rare it was to find someone whose presence felt comforting, inspiring, and genuine. As they walked back toward the cafe where they had parked, John suggested they take a small detour to the playground nearby. Emma's laughter echoed in his memory, reminding him of the joy children brought into life, and he felt a desire to share that joy with someone who could appreciate it. Taylor agreed, and they spent a few minutes watching children play, pointing out small details and laughing at little antics, feeling a sense of shared humanity and simple happiness. Finally, the time came to part ways for the evening. John walked Taylor to her motorcycle, the soft hum of the engine a comforting backdrop. They stood together, the night quiet around them, and both felt a mix of anticipation, excitement, and gratitude. John reached out and gently touched her hand, a simple yet meaningful gesture. Taylor looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth, and held his gaze. "I'm really glad we met, John," she said softly. "Me too, Taylor," he replied, feeling a profound sense of connection. They exchanged a few more words, promising to see each other again soon, and as Taylor rode off into the night, John watched her go, feeling hope, happiness, and a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. Walking back home, John thought about the journey they had started together, the shared laughter, honest conversations, and small acts of kindness that had built a foundation of trust and understanding. He knew that life was full of unexpected surprises and that sometimes, the simplest experiences like a humble blind date with only a few coins in your pocket could become the most meaningful and transformative. Taylor, riding under the starlit sky, felt a similar joy. She thought about John's quiet strength, his honesty, and the way he had made her feel safe, valued, and understood. The evening had reminded her that meaningful connections could emerge when least expected, and that sometimes, the courage to open your heart could lead to something extraordinary. That night, both John and Taylor reflected on the rare bond they had begun to form, a bond built on mutual respect, honesty, and shared experiences. They knew that their story was just beginning, that life's ordinary moments could transform into extraordinary memories when hearts were open, and that the future held promise for joy, trust, and meaningful companionship. In their separate homes, they drifted to sleep with smiles on their faces, hearts light with hope, and minds filled with anticipation for the adventures, laughter, and connection that awaited them in the days to come. And as the city slept under a blanket of stars, two very different lives, shaped by unique experiences and challenges, had begun to intertwine, proving that even the simplest gestures, the smallest acts of kindness, and the willingness to be open and genuine could spark a journey of love, understanding, and shared happiness that would last far beyond a single evening.